Hello, lovely people. I am sitting here in the cold a week before Christmas, and I'm thinking about Christmas cards and letters and texts and all of these other things. And I realized that I want to do an episode on communication types and how I interact with them as opposed to how others might interact with them. I think this is one of the places where you're going to find the most variation between us. I'm Leah Batlle-Rafferty, and this is Memoirs of a Neurodivergent Latina. So, communication, for sure, I prefer face-to-face. Which sounds funny because I've talked about masking and how difficult it is and all of these different things. But I seem to do a lot better with being in front of someone and having fun conversations and discussing things than when I'm not. When I was younger, I was never one of those teens who could pick up the phone and talk for hours with anybody. In fact, I hated the phone. I would pick up the phone and I would quickly organize where I was going to go and who I was going to meet and at what time so I could tell my parents, and then I would hang up. And that was pretty much my phone conversations. Granted, once I got a modem and there were bulletin boards, I started to play on the bulletin boards, but that was different because it was role play. It was doing, Dungeons and Dragons sorts of things. I find it really different to send a text or to write a message on Facebook or something of the sort than to Discord or to, back in the day, get on those bulletin boards and chat with people. Or, wow, I'm going to date myself. And those of you who don't know anything about this, that's okay. I used to be on MUDs, multi-user dungeons, and moos and muxes and all the different things that came out of it. And part of it was role play, but I could definitely hold a conversation there. But I feel like when I was on those, even when I was just having kind of an out of character conversation, in some ways I was pretending to be a more confident person than I was. And you can tell right now that this is a very complex topic. So let me tell you some hard and fast rules that I know about myself. I hate speaking into midair unless I have some kind of set script that I am planning to do, or if I'm doing something like educational, etc. So like where I know exactly what I'm going to say and it's for a very specific purpose and I don't have to worry about holding a conversation or pretending that there's someone on the other end or something like that, then I'm okay. This podcast is actually really outside my comfort zone because I'm pretending that you're somewhere around here and I'm having a conversation with you. And if I didn't, I would feel ridiculously shy about it. And I don't know why. When my kids were little, I really did them a disservice because none of the people around me spoke Spanish. And so I could not hold my baby and talk in Spanish into midair. I just couldn't. I could talk to my ex in English. He knew French, but he didn't know Spanish. And my current husband knows English only. So it just didn't happen. Like I couldn't do it. I cannot use speech to text. I can't sit with my phone in my hand and talk to the phone, especially if there's people around. Like the idea that I'm talking into midair and telling the phone to do something doesn't work for me, which means, of course, that, any of the other speech to text type things that are around that everyone uses, I can't use. And I think that's okay. I cannot write physically. So when I was younger and email wasn't around, etc., I had some extensive help with writing, and it bothers me to write. And I've learned that this is actually part of the neurodivergence that I have. My son has ligament issues that affect his writing, and I bet that if I went to get tested, I would too. Autism seems to have that at times. I didn't even realize that it could be part of my neurodivergence, but I guess it is. So when I was little, writing sucked. So I didn't want to write letters to people. I mean, and writing letters is also talking to midair in some ways. It's really odd. So why is Discord different? I don't know. Maybe because I know I can get on a live chat with someone. And maybe it's because most of the time we're talking about a game. And I seem to do okay when we're talking about games. So if it's a board game, if it's a video game, if it's a role-playing game, I can kind of do things that I normally wouldn't be able to do. Texting and Messenger and all of those things, I can do a little bit, and I do try to. But if I have to keep the conversation going, it might die. I've never been good at remembering to catch up with people. The other day on Threads, and I wish I could remember which user it was. I can't remember right now, but I want to make sure that you all know that this was not me. I want to attribute it to whoever it was that said it on Threads. But they mentioned something with their ADHD that caught my attention. They said that when somebody was outside of their view, basically, that it was almost like object permanence. Like it was difficult to communicate, mostly because they were sort of out of sight, out of mind. But I don't think that's exactly it with me. It's somewhat close maybe, and not really. I think for me, it's more like there's so much that I have to focus on locally that then I have trouble extending that focus elsewhere. You're dealing with sensory stuff. You're dealing with whatever health conditions you might have. So I have migraines. I have IBS, which I also learned is a comorbidity a lot of times. I have, work, which is a lot of hours during a week. I'm tired from masking. I want to curl up with a book. There's always something in the house that needs to be done that's kind of pinging at my attention. And I think it's just all a lot. And so thinking about things outside of my current sphere of influence is a lot. So I don't tend to do it. And it's not that I don't want to talk to people, and it's not that I don't like people. In fact, I have a text sort of thread with, a signal thread with all our best friends in it. My husband does most of the talking. So I go on and I say things now and then, and I listen to what people say, and I kind of interact as needed. But I kind of let him run the show on there, and I respond now and then. And luckily, my friends know me, and so they accept that I'm going to be the quiet one a lot on the thread. There's also other things too, like I don't get holiday cards. I just don't get them. I don't know if my mom sent them or not, but I really cards are generic. They're so generic. And I feel like if I'm going to thank someone, I'm probably going to call them and thank them. It feels a little more personal than sending a card that somebody else wrote. But that's just me, maybe. So I have a hard time with things like sending cards and holding that etiquette, because it seems so odd to me. Like, why would I want to send somebody a card that within a week or two they're going to throw away? And I could probably call them and just say thank you. Yeah. It's different if you have a personalized present. And that's going a little further off from communication, but okay. Anyways, communication. I also have some stuff that has somewhat to do with my neurodivergence, but it has to do with some small minor traumas and stress when I was younger. So people like to text. I don't like to text. I don't like to text, partially because of what I said, but partially because a long, long time ago, not in a galaxy far, far away. I was a systems administrator, and this was back in the day where the Blackberries were like kind of the most up-to-date, amazing phones that you could get your hands on. And we had them so that we could get paged or texted or whatever if we needed to come in to do something or if we needed to answer a question. But of course, you're not supposed to text and drive, and you're not supposed to respond to things while you're on the highway. And so I recall many circumstances, but let's talk about this particular one. I am on the road. I am about to get to a toll booth, but it's one of those like Chicago. Yes, I lived in Chicago back then. Chicago gridlock traffics. The toll booth was still a thing. And there was this one intersection where it widened out like crazy coming out of the city and then immediately squeezed down to like 3 lanes. So it was a really fraught piece of the drive. And they start texting me. So I got a text. I couldn't look at the text because I was doing this rush hour traffic drive that was pretty bad. And so I get the text and I figure I'll answer it as soon as I can pull over when it's safe. So then the text happens again. And when I don't respond to the text, then there's an email, which the BlackBerry lets me know there's an email as well. And then when I didn't answer the email right away, then there's a phone call. And that's how it was every time there was a text. And by the way, this was like, oh, you just left. I just have a question about, something in maintenance. It wasn't the world's ending and things are falling apart. It really was kind of a standard question that really could have waited 20 minutes. The point is that after X amount of years of having that be the normal text etiquette where I worked, and this was before everyone else was really texting, I ended up with this kind of stress response to texts. They make me feel really uncomfortable, especially if they're coming rapid fire. So if you send me a text and then it stops, I'll be fine. But if I end up with 10 texts in a row from somebody, I'm going to be freaking. And it is not a response to what's being sent so much as that kind of stress response that I was trained into. Now let's talk about visual communications like pictures and videos. I am great on video if I'm having a conversation, if I have a script. Otherwise, I get really, really tense about people watching me. I don't like to be watched, and so it's really weird to do a video that is candid. I just don't do very well with it. I don't like to be watched. When I am myself, when I'm acting, it's a completely different story. Once again, there's all these nuances to this communication stuff, which is why this episode was hard to do. But just a candid video, like a TikTok or a YouTube video or something like that, that's very unlikely to happen with me. I don't do them. The photos, which I guess are another way of communicating, right? If you think about Instagram and stuff like that. I don't take photos of people. I don't take photos very much at all. My husband loves to take photos. Mostly, I'm okay with him taking a photo now and then. I don't like candid photos of me. I don't know. There's just something about having a photograph taken, about being watched, that makes me uneasy and puts me on edge. And so I have to kind of gear myself up when everyone at work is, oh, look, it's the holidays and everyone's here. Let's take a huge picture with everybody. I'm like, okay, fine. I'll go into the back somewhere and people will refuse to let me hide between them, and I'll just be in the picture. What's really hard about all this is that it's not that I was about to double negative it. I do want to talk to people. I do want to hang out with my friends. I do love to be in front of them and have like conversations. I just, for some reason, cannot do it remotely. And I think everything in my surroundings takes up so much of my attention that it's really hard to pull my attention to something that's happening further away. It's probably the closest I've come to something that feels right in explaining it. Now, there is a difference between what I have to do at work and what I will do when given the opportunity to decide, right? So at work, if I need to email, I email. If I need to talk on the phone, I talk on the phone. If I need to video call, I video call. So when it's work related, I work around all of the things that normally might be my personal preference when I'm doing individual communications with people. I'm also very, very good at making sure I get back to people within 24 hours at work because my very first job was actually modem phone support. And so I'm very aware of the whole don't leave people hanging. So send them an email. Say, hey, I got your email. I may not be able to get to it right now, but you know now that I responded and that I got it and that it's in my queue. Anyways, it's funny. I hadn't thought until this moment about how my communication patterns at work differ significantly from my personal communication patterns when I'm just dealing with friends and talking individually to people. I wonder if that's part of masking. I don't know. It's a really interesting question to me whether things like email etiquette in a workplace counts as masking. I mean, I guess that would explain even more the exhaustion, right? So you're masking when you're having conversations, but you're also masking when you're trying to figure out how the heck to send an email correctly and make sure that you've crossed all your T's, dotted all your I's, and that it gets to the point that it needs to get to. Okay, so I think there are probably a lot of people out there who have different preferences for communication. Even within my neurodivergence, I have heard that there are YouTube influencers that are neurodiverse that don't mind being in front of the camera. I have been told by my sister that about some TikTok content creators who are neurodiverse, who have even autism and are okay doing the TikTok videos. So this is definitely one of the places where there is a broad range of comfort levels and excitement about different types of communication. And there's one other thing that I wonder about, which I don't know how to put it together with this, and maybe it doesn't quite go with this, but it feels like it might have a little bit to do with it. I don't have good visual memory. I've said it before briefly. And it turns out that this too is part of the neurodivergence. I didn't even know that. I didn't know that, face blindness and things like that were associated with autism. But part of me wonders if it's just that. Like, since I can't picture who I'm talking to, maybe I have a harder time picturing the reactions or the way people will deal with things. And when I'm in front of you, I don't have to picture it. You're actually doing it. You're actually behaving however you're going to behave based on the things I say, and I can respond to that. So maybe it's that. Maybe it's the fact that my brain can't picture your reactions very well when I'm trying to send something over text or I'm trying to call you. And so I try to avoid it. It's funny, right? How you can't always be sure what your own motivations are. Either way, I will do an entire episode at some point on the lack of visual memory, the spatial awareness issues, etc., that come with autism. But for now, I hope if you're listening and you think this sounds like you, that you're reassured that, there's other people in the world like that. I know that it always makes me feel better, like I'll be okay. Thank you for tuning in to Memoirs of a Neurodivergent Latina. This podcast was written, edited, and produced by me, Leah Batlle-Rafferty. All music is by Carlos Neda, and this podcast is part of Labrat Solutions, Inc.